Hi, and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Mueller. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, John Mueller is here along with Dr. Ann Gillies and our special guest, Ute Heggen. She's an author and a trans widow. What would be a trans widow? Well, a trans widow is somebody whose husband has transitioned or partner has transitioned. And it typically, I shouldn't say it always does, but it typically leaves devastation throughout the family. John Mueller is here. He's an expert. I'm just a broadcaster, but John, you know more than I. Why don't we delve into this a little bit deeper after part one? There's some concerning things that happen within a transition like this within a family. Obviously, the children and the parents both go through a lot. Ute's been through a heck of a lot, and so have her kids for that matter, and that's probably the only reason I can make that assertion. But you come with a lot of credible knowledge and a lot of background in this topic because you deal with sexual predators on a regular basis. So the man that she was married to who transitioned, who she calls Nettie, is an individual that you probably might find personality-wise within the population that you deal with in the penal system down there in the U.S. Would that be fair to say?
That can be, Brad, but there's also a population of men that have gotten themselves addicted to pornography. So there's a little bit difference between a predator versus someone that, you know, does not perpetrate but has gotten into deviance. So
is that caught, not caught? Is that as simple as that is?
Well, and that's the tricky thing about this whole thing, because the more a man gets into deviance, and again, the by nature, deviance is different than lust. Deviance has to do with having a negative effect. And the further down someone goes, especially men, the further they go down into pornography, they are going to be consuming that which will be showing the defiling and the harming of another person, primarily women and children, and there's bestiality in there as well.
Now, when you say you say consuming, we're not just talking about sitting at home and looking at porn on your laptop or your phone, as an example. We're talking about engaging in places and things that happen outside the bedroom or your house.
That's right. It's hard to make the case, especially with what I know, that for a guy to say, well, I just watch it, I don't act upon it. Really? No, the burden of proof is upon them. When you look at their life and you look at the impact, and that's why I'm so grateful that Dr. Ann Gillies is with me, our capable co-host. And Ann, this is heart-wrenching. You and your own family were impacted by a man that was deeply steeped in pornography, and Ute Heggen is back with us. And this is such a compelling story because those of you that have been betrayed by the men you thought you knew, and to find out that the harm they perpetrated, certainly in the marriage, leaves your marriage shattered and lives in the wake, damaged kids. And so I can only imagine, Anne, as we've been listening to Ute's story, it's been stirring things up in you, and that's why we're very appreciative that Ute is back with us.
We are. Thank you, Ute, for coming back on. As you were talking, I was just thinking, because we want to focus this session kind of on helping women who may be caught in these kind of marriages or relationships. And the thing that really struck me when you were talking last time, Ute, was the increasing level of deviance that you end up as a partner, as a spouse, being exposed to and being challenged to and become involved in. And it reminded me, and I'll share this with you. I don't know if I said this before to you, Ute, but my former husband came home one night, and I didn't know he was re-engaging in homosexual affairs at this point. Because he did so much the same as what your husband did. No, I'm good. I'm not. Yeah, I love you. And that's, I'm committed to the marriage. And then he came home and he said, I've met someone else and I love him and I love you and I want you both. You see, there was always this progression of deviance. And so at that point, I'm like, not on your life, buddy, not in your life. And this is the thing that as women, and I think you'll agree with me, and I think you're going to speak to this, is that we need to get our backs up against this kind of stuff and say, no more. That's the way you want to go, bye-bye. Because you're not going to continue corrupting our marriage, defiling our marriage bed, and affecting our children. I wish I had been that strong then. But Ute, tell us then what you have some stages that you want to talk about, and you want to help women kind of identify where things are at in these relationships and what to do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all. And I would say it's really important not to let this marriage continue.
Yes.
And I am appreciative that you will talk honestly about that you had been, trying to convince yourself that your husband might stop this. And I felt like it was my job all of a sudden to present normal life as perfect so that my husband will want that. Now that I've found out that he's been doing things that don't fit in the bounds of what our marriage was agreed upon from the very start. And what you're against actually now, if your husband is going to a couple of therapists who are on this affirmation path, you're up against a team. You're playing this kind of soccer game with one person on your team, and I don't know how many people on his team. And he's trying to get the children on his team. And he's playing the children against you. And it's very, very hard for women to come to that understanding, to be sort of neutral, hard-nosed, and say, okay, this is, now I've seen this, and it must mean that I'm going to have to figure out how to go on by myself and be a single mom and, get all the balls rolling. And one of the things that I did do to take care of myself emotionally, because I felt that what he was doing was stealing my motherhood experience from me. Not just because he was thinking that he wanted to be called mom or mommy, but because he was stealing my enjoyment of life. I was so preoccupied. And so I fought for that. I have several notebooks where I wrote down the cute things that my little guys were saying. And I put some of those into my book. Every chapter I ended with a beautiful story of my sweet children saying some funny thing. And my book, In the Curated Woods. And I am so happy with myself that I had the intuition to do that. And I recommend keeping that for yourself and for your children. We used to even read that. We on a Saturday afternoon or something when nothing else is going on, I'd say, let's read about what you said when you were 2. I remember one it was my older son. He must have been 4. We had gone skating and they were putting on the skaters' waltz. And he said, "What do they mean, the skaters' wallets?" I figured Brad would like that as a hockey guy. The skaters' wallets. Why do the skaters' wallets have that? But anyway, it's very important to keep that in your heart, and you have to focus on that.
And to remind your children, I think that is such an important
Yes.
word. You're speaking to women and moms out there that you're always still their mom, and you have these memories. And it's interesting because I think every single mother will resonate with what you just said, wallet. just came to mind for me, and you fathers probably have some things too that your children have said. My oldest son used to call pedestrians pedestrians. You know, it's such a simple. He was about 4 or 5. Like, what?
Right.
How would he know how to pronounce it right? Look,
Yes.
Mom, there's a pedestrian. I'm like,
Yes.
what? And we laughed and laughed about that, because you need to hold on to those moments. Women need to do that in the midst of the pain that you have, but your children have. Okay, so now, as we go forward with this, and you're describing some of those things, what other advice?
Yes.
What other advice do
I
you
say,
have?
then there's the book that you have to keep about everything about his behavior. You have to, and if there was anything where he pushed you or was aggressive in any way, you have to think back and say, okay, how old was the child? What season of the year? Was it a weekend or a weekday? And really, you have to remember everything and write it down. Now, I'm wondering how John would weigh in on this. I didn't have technology to like go recording what my children were saying. I mean, at one point I just borrowed a big, clunky video camera in the 1990s, but I wonder if it would at all be feasible to say to this guy, I want to record us talking about what you're saying about yourself. And I'm going to write out a transcript of it, and you're going to sign it, and you're going to date it, and you're going to say, yes, I agree. This is what we said. Because they manufacture what you said. They twist your words around. They turn it upside down.
And we know that no guy's going to agree to that. So it's, it's always a tricky thing. First, if somebody's going to be recording somebody, now over the phone, but when it has to do with spouses, right? And even what's going on in schools with our kids, I'm not an attorney, right?
Yeah.
But I think in normal everyday family life, to record what goes on within our own homes, we do that anyways. And so I recommend that if a spouse has concerns about how a conversation is going to play out, or just ensuring that everybody has accurate recall, I would say in this day and age, that is the benefit of a cell phone camera with video.
Yeah.
So.
Ute, I would have to recommend a third book. And the third book is partially what you're discussing here and now, which is, again, keeping track of what you were just discussing, plus keeping track of your therapists along the way, the therapists that they're forcing you to go and meet with, keeping track of what they have to say, keeping track of dates and times. I still go back to coercion, intimidation, extortion. I think that bullying, those are just some of the words, and some of them are criminality, criminal, indictment. Really, that's the truth. I believe that, and it was the same thing for COVID. And you hate to say that C word, but we have teachers, we have governments, we have politicians who have forced out millions of dollars. Here's, you win $1 million if you get that shot. Well, you know what? Your life is going to get better. All you got to do is do what we're saying in the bedroom. Ute, everything's going to be fine. Right. He'll be great.
Yes.
Enjoy yourself.
Well, no.
Right?
Yes. I did not make the mistake of trying it out as far as anything in bed.
Right.
So,
But just them insinuating that you should is bad enough.
Oh, they weren't insinuating. They were instructing me.
Including pornography, including bringing porn in.
They suggested I should watch something.
Right? I tell women, do not succumb to that. If that's not your thing and you haven't been doing that, I strongly, strongly advise against that, because it's never going to go well. It's never going to go anywhere good.
Yeah. No. Women are used in those instances. So why would you want to? And a therapist? I would tell them no. The other thing, though, this goes along with what Brad was thinking, and I was going to throw this out to you guys. What about, there's no reason, I don't think, that you could not record your sessions with your therapist. I used to ask clients if they would like me to record the session so they could listen to it later. When we were going through some trauma work, that was so beneficial to them. It wasn't easy. So they just say, oh man, listening to us go through that session again was pretty tough. But you know what? It helped me, because then I'm thinking, okay, this is what's really going on. So if they can go the therapist way, then why can't a client?
So beneficial in court is what I'm thinking. So beneficial in court.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hold those people accountable.
I want John to speak. I want John to speak on this for just a minute. John, even Dr. Ann for that matter too. I think you're both clinical experts. So with that being said, if you were doing this, pushing, indoctrinating, and telling Ute to get involved, and you were the one doing that, would you not agree that you'd sort of feel that was criminal because of your ethics and your code of ethics that you've had to sign upon and, base your careers around?
That's the irony of this whole thing, Brad. In any ethics course that any therapist has to take, right, the emphasis is on you cannot put your values on the other person, which is true. Okay, a therapist's goal is to facilitate, right, to help the client get in touch with his or her own feelings, and it's their life. So we all have a tough enough time running our own lives. We don't need to run somebody else's, number one. But it really is. That's what's so ironic about this, that what has happened with the trans deception, the entire push, and what's happened in the entire field of mental health, and Anne, you can speak to this as well, then what's so preposterous is you have therapists that have become activists.
Oh, yes.
When what we're told, and especially if you come from a conservative perspective, but you don't want to anyways, that you can't unduly influence a client. And it's true, that's not our role. So this idea of conversion therapy, it's silly. No therapist worth his or her salt wants to unduly influence a client, because let's say you actually have a client who's just shy of being harmed, but let's say in a gaslighting situation, we could sit there, we may darn well know what would be helpful for this client. Well, at the end of the day, ultimately, it's got to be within the client. And so this idea, we could even say, you know what, I think you need to go no contact. So from now on, that's what we're going to work on. Do not have any. Well, number one, how well does that work? Number two, that's not my role. My role should be, I've got to help build the client up. So whether in an abusive, now overt abuse, people need to get out, and that's a different issue. But if they're in a one up, one down, lopsided relationship where it's hurtful, as far as emotionally injurious, right, we have to bring a client to a point, and same thing with confronting too soon. You don't want to have a client get in touch with their feelings and then go confront somebody. That's right, right? So we cannot, and we're not to unduly influence, yet look what's happening.
Okay, so wait, you said unduly influencing like 3 times now, and I'm going to say this to you because obviously they were unduly influencing Ute.
Absolutely,
because they were instructing her with instructions. That was the word she used.
They're putting pressure on this wife to just go along with it. As a matter of fact, that therapist was gaslighting Ute in trying to say, you know what, just go along with it. Who asked the therapist that? That's not a therapist's job. Dr. Ann Gillies, I'm all worked up as a therapist. How do you feel?
I think, I hear you, John, because quite honestly, that is just exactly what is counterintuitive. Right. It's counterintuitive. And so the reality is, wherever this therapist is coming from, and you alluded that this was a trans-affirming, cross-sex affirming therapist, so you already have this bias. It is a bias. We all come with biases. And so this therapist then was trying to manipulate you into doing something you did not want to do. And that, sexually, no less, sexually.
Yes.
And that goes against your own values. And that is absolutely wrong. So for women who are experiencing these kind of things, we just want to get it out there that you don't have to put up with that, right? You don't have to put up with that.
No.
Ude,
Also-
I've got another quick question for you because I think
yes.
we'll transition into this real fast.
Yes.
If you know 10 other women who are trans widows, much like yourself, or even 20 for that matter.
Yes, I do.
Imagine, and I'm asking, I guess, Dr. John Euler and Dr. Ann what their take is on this, because I think it's their perspective that is going to help individuals that are in that trans widow position. Is there criminality here? And is there a way, we're all going to say the same thing, which is that these individuals, if Ute was to go ahead and file a criminal case against her therapist who was pushing her to participate and do all this stuff because it's in the best interest of her marriage and blah, 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 and she comes back and says, no, like, sodomy is still sodomy and it's still illegal. Is that not right or wrong?
It's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
That's right.
Not illegal for 16 and overs.
16 and over. Okay.
Yep. They want to reduce that to 14-year-olds.
But forced sodomy is illegal.
Forced.
Okay.
It's rape.
So now let me ask you, is Ute being forced? Your marriage is up at stake. Your life is up at stake. Your kids are up at stake. Is that not force?
Yeah, Brad, what I would say is in the field, it's not illegal, right? And so that's, no criminality has taken place. Now, is it ethical, right? So that's where it comes. And what I would say is this: if a spouse, and regardless of what situation, but if a spouse believes that a therapist has directed, has unduly influenced, has manipulated their spouse to do something, or foisted, we're hearing this conversion therapy stuff. Well, it goes both ways. So if I'm a therapist and I say, Ute, I know you're for this thing that used to be called traditional marriage. Oh, I'm sorry, that means keeping your promises exclusive. Oh, something like that. But I know you're into this, like you're kind of spunky and traditional, but I think you ought to be open-minded. What I've just done as a therapist is I've advocated for her to allow her spouse, her husband, to go have an affair. That is unethical.
And can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Because you should never believe, as the wife, that it will stop if you just make him happy in bed and watch some baloney together with him, which is not good to have in your household, because what if your child wakes up with a nightmare and sees this awful stuff? And I mean, that was, I said, but we have children, we have little kids. Personally, I think it's kind of sexy to be doing it quietly, but but then I'm so traditional. But it's very important to understand, and this is really the strength of what both you, Ann, and John say, is that he won't be faithful to you if you make this bargain, with the portrait of Dorian Gray or something, that this is going to stay together because you are agreeing to bend your definition of what your marriage was. He is going to violate that later, and you are going to live for months or even years wondering when. And
you're absolutely right. And he will push for more and more deviance, more things that are just absolutely what we would never, ever have imagined ourselves doing. And now young women are coming into marriages already saturated with an education that has led them into accepting deviance. So how do we get back? Well, here's a question for you. How do we get back to some kind of traditional morality? Because quite honestly, we need to go back there, because the culture has so been saturated with this ethic, this religion that is counter I would say counterintuitive to the whole sense of who we are as human beings, and our worth and value, our dignity has been robbed from us. Anyways, that's probably more than I need to say, but yeah.
Well, I will just redefine that or reframe that. You have become a prop, and the children have become a prop.
Good
In
word.
his
100%. You know,
little drama.
if I might, Brad, we're gonna do something on the fly here. Can I bring up a slide?
Good to go, John.
Okay, I want people to understand this is so crucial. Ute, what is not being told to wives is this.
Well, that's, yeah.
Right.
Okay, people need to understand that when a man gets into pornography, I would say ever since the 80s, it's safe to say this. So we're here in 2023. Okay, so we're going to bring this to reality right now. No guy that gets into deviance is not into pornography first. There's a progression downward from the straight and narrow on the left. That's the good place to be, over to the right. This is 100% consistent. If anybody wants to debate me out in our viewing audience, please do so. Do your own chart. It's probably going to take you working with a lot of men who have crossed lines. Where do you find those? Typically in a prison. I've worked with these kind of men now for about 14 years. And this is the one chart that gets their attention, meaning they know that I know, and then productive work can happen. So when we are talking about a therapist suggesting to a wife that she tolerate pornography, number one, the wife doesn't know what number the guy really is at.
Yeah, that's right.
Can a level 10 guy pretend to be at a level 1? Of course he can. They're into impression management. The further you go from left to right, the more into psychopathy you morph. And my contention is you move through, it's all selfishness, it is progressing. You move through narcissism into sociopathy, into psychopathy. How can I prove it? We've heard of the dark triad, which is narcissism and psychopathy and Machiavellianism. I simply ask this: can you find a psychopath that is not a narcissist? What is narcissism? It is a huge ego. Psychopaths have huge egos. To believe you have the right to somebody else's person and property and livelihood and person, place, and things and everything, you have to have a good self-esteem. Whacked out, not healthy, but there ain't nothing wrong with your self-esteem. Where do we find those people? Politics, finance, and Wall Street. We find them in education, psychology, the ministry, everywhere. Okay, so if someone is suggesting to a woman that they tolerate the allowance of a little bit of pornography, this is where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And the guy's going to start selfish, and then we've got the callous and indifferent, and then we've got willful and purposeful. There will be an increasing degree of malevolence within the mind of a man, and the desire will tend downward in terms of age, and they get into what's called barely legal, every single one of them. The pedophiles continue on down, and that's why you have women in the porn industry. They start to look younger, or they dress younger, and they will dress the young kids older, like toddlers in tiaras. It is very dangerous, and nobody will talk about this. When I discuss this chart, I'll get out of this now. When I discuss this chart with those that are pushing pedophilia, they come unglued because they know that I've unmasked them. It takes work to become a sexual deviant, because with each stage, you are transgressing and crossing and killing off your conscience. So by the time you move into about from a level 4 to 5, you are no longer the same.
John, this chart isn't just for men. This chart moves from left to right for a male or a female, right?
I would say it's primarily male, Brad.
You can say it's primarily male, but I'm going to ask you this question, and we've seen an increase in porn on the internet. We've also seen an increase of alpha female, beta male porn on the internet, like a massive increase of that.
Right.
It almost pops before anything else that would be called traditional. porn. So that being said, there's all kinds of videos of all kinds of women performing these kinds of acts that Ute's therapist is suggesting that she partake in. And I believe that this is actually changing. You as a therapist can say that it's predominantly men, but based on the internet porn angle, there's a lot more of the females that are hitting that left side and working their way right.
That's right. What I would say, though, is I would come up with a different chart. We'll do that. There's going to be a difference, and it matches, for instance, when you think about how many prisons there are in Pennsylvania, for instance, there are, I think, 25. Only 2 are female. And within the female population, very, very rare, it's almost unheard of, do you have a woman that's perpetrating upon a child with an object. It's almost unheard of. It's very common among pedophiles. It's inevitable.
No, I'm not talking about children. I'm talking about the men that they are married to.
Yeah, there's going to be different issues. And for instance, Ute's husband, ex-husband, since he was abused, he probably would not abuse a child. But if he goes down far enough, guess what that porn is going to start to involve? At the very least, the age of the people he is viewing, they're going to get younger. And so I've opened up a can of worms for us. I'll get out of this chart now, but I really want people to understand that by the time also a man becomes deviant like that, it's not just his taste, but his ability to manipulate and gaslight. And Ute, that's what, and Anne as well, right? To have husbands that were able to give themselves permission to justify and rationalize tossing their promises. And that's what we're talking about. Men that decided they wanted to do them, that their happiness was more important than having integrity and a promise and sacrificing themselves on behalf of their wife and their kids. I really don't care, as I tell the guys in my sex offender treatment groups, I don't want to hear the word happiness come out of your mouth again. It's time to grow up and sacrifice yourself and quit being so myopic. That's the issue. Then you layer it with all sorts of crap. You can have guys that aren't into porn, very few guys, right? But a boy has his toys. No, a guy needs to grow up. And so we're talking about men that have given themselves permission and then found therapists that are sanctioning these myopic men that get into narcissism, and then they run circles around their wives who've trusted them, and they leave their marriages and kids in the wake. And for generations then, things are in shambles, and then you get pounded on, Ute, right? You're being told that it's your issue, and now your kids, your sons, have been emotionally tied up in knots to where, in order to survive, what have they done? They have blamed you, the mother. And it's so tragic, and people can probably see, I get energized about this because I see the fallout every day. We can tell,
John. We can tell.
All right. I see it every day.
Can I just say one thing before you go back to talking about the children? Brad is actually not wrong about female pornography usage. Since the 90s, it's really been pushed on women. And it's not that they might, I don't think the issue is so much about them becoming perps, although there is a very small percentage. The reality, though, and it ties right into what we're talking, is that they are already changing their brain, and they are putting those new neural pathways of this hypersexual information into their brains. So when they get married and their husband or their partner decides, oh, let's do this, they're already right there. And this is what is killing our kids and killing our culture.
They're out of the bed. They're out of the bed. They're out of the bedroom, and they're actually. I've seen the increase, and I don't go to the strip club like I maybe used to. But to be honest, and that again, you're going with your buddies after work, blah blah blah, right? So it's not like I'm going there every day to hang out, right? But we now, I know, and from working in the club industry too, over my 25 years of that industry that I was in, not just broadcasting, but also in the nightclub entertainment industry. And that being said, whether it was male dancers, obviously the male dancers would pack the women in, but you know what we saw happening in the mid 90s, early 90s? We saw an upkick in females starting to come out to the male or the female strip clubs and engaging by throwing loonies and taking lap dances and engaging, getting out of the bedroom like I was talking about earlier. We started to see an uptick in that happening. And again, that was exactly the same time that things like, well, MindGeek or Pornhub started to just climb, and we saw all these other porn industry related sites start to just take off. And porn really just kicked into gear back in about 1997 when the internet really kind of kicked off. Prior to that, it wasn't such a big thing. It wasn't anything. It was like you had to go and be embarrassed by buying a dirty magazine at a gas station, right? But the internet opened a world of this, and I saw that this uptick in females was concerning. Why are women sitting in a really male burlesque entertainment venue and watching girls take off their clothes and saluting it and praising it? And then
it's all because of the sexualization of our society that started in the late 40s.
Well, then it became amateur night, and amateur night started to get the girls out of the crowd coming up and participating, and now the girls are taking it off from the audience. Again, this is like late 90s now, early 2000s. This all started to transition to that kind of a scenario. It's not that the guys are up front anymore now. The girls are up front and the guys are at the back of the room. It used to be the other way around, if there was even a woman found at the back of the room. And 90% of the time prior to 1997, there wasn't even a female in the room. Maybe your waitress or your bartender, and that's about it.
That's it. And Brad, so you can see how easy it is now for a wife that assumed that the man she knew and the man that was making the same kind of promise, I mean, he didn't have to promise, right? So the question is, what were the vows? Vow is an old-fashioned term meaning a promise. When you take a loan out at the bank, you make a vow. You sign a credit card. We're vowing to what? To make good on our promise. So when you have two people that through social contract, right, promise one another, the only thing we have is their word. Well, if a guy isn't going to make good on his word and he's going to lead a double life, then don't make a promise. Don't set her up for. See here, the Lord's down. I don't know if you heard that. I've got some thunder in the background, so I'm going to add to this. But so what we're talking about is we have such a shift in society, including in the field of mental health and therapists and psychology, that are doubling down on these women who were just believing the man she married, and all of a sudden, that's bad enough. He's betraying, but he's found a therapist that says, well, you know what? Don't worry about it. Well, and she's left, then what do I do? And I think what I tell women, and then we'll stop and we'll let Ute chime back in, but Brad, you're bringing up an excellent point. There has been the sexualization. That's what the trans movement is capitalizing upon. And what I try to encourage women to think through is this, and it really converged with the BDSM kink crap. That's how I put it.
Yeah.
If you have two people, you have a man and a woman, so they go out on a date, and I was working with the sex offenders the day that movie came out on Friday, Valentine's Day, and I took a poll among sex offenders. What do you think about 50 Shades of Grey? And they looked at me. I'm talking about a graduate level research study. I had the guys right there, okay? And what they said in consensus was this. They kind of all got a grin because they're watching the commercials on Block TV. They knew it was coming out. So I said, hey, guess what came out today? They all knew. I thought, wasn't that interesting? What do you guys think about it? They said, you know, this movie's done the best grooming for us that we could ever do. What a woman needs to understand is this. If she gets into deviant sexuality, she is approaching this different. She thinks the guy is thinking about it the same way she is. So you can have a guy and a gal go out and watch 50 Shades of Grey. The woman will know the storyline. The guy's clueless. Oh, yeah. A woman needs to understand that the guy that's into kink, you don't know if you're going to return alive, but he knows he'll return alive. Male sexuality, regardless of what the trans movement is trying to do, male sexuality hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is our ability to discern a predator and what happens when men go deviant, because it doesn't happen for women. It's different. It'll impact them, but you don't hear many female serial rapists and murderers.
No, but they're mostly dominatrixes still, John, and that's what I
right.
throw that right back at you that way.
Right. There's a different dynamic, but the one thing you won't have is that a dominatrix will take that implement and slice a guy from one end of his torso to the next. But you'll have a man that'll do that. By nature, it's very different, and that's what's so sad when you have, and dangerous, when you have mental health professionals that wives are trusting, say, you know what, it's okay, just allow some of this into the bedroom, and before you know it, what's been introduced is a very toxic cocktail that's never going to go anything well. I get energized about this because 3 times a week I'm working with men that have harmed people, and so I guess I bring that to bear. But Ute, so we've been capitalizing your time.
I want to ask.
We're going to give you the last word. Talk to us about this. Talk to us talk to the wives. Give us some feedback with all this, and I'll buckle my seatbelt so I stay restrained.
Okay. There are just 2 not very long things that I want to say about that. Number one, based on the context that I've had with about 35 trans widows now, the ones who tried to stay and tried to accommodate this perverse sexuality are taking longer to heal. They engage in some self-blame because they did it really against their own instincts. And then now I'm going to just segue a little bit, because money is the other piece of this. A woman in my shoes has to start kind of counting every penny that was spent going back 10 years. And because this guy is going to have spent thousands and thousands of dollars. He might be buying an outfit, wearing it once, throwing it away, because he's leading this secret life. I never knew of evidence that my husband had put on my clothes. I'm smaller than him. It would have been stretched out. And the fact is, he wouldn't have liked my clothes because my wardrobe was so meager and worn out. I never cared that much about clothes. I wore like the same 2 pairs of jeans I had 3 pairs of jeans, one, the flannel line jeans, for Wisconsin winters, and then the other 2 jeans just because, I sometimes, you need one because the other one is dirty, right? So I was not a clothes horse, right? Even though I have a BFA in dance and stuff, literally, like I had embarrassingly holy sweet leotards, and so he wasn't going to want, my clothes. He was going to go to Lord & Taylor. He needed the cushy service, just think about this. A guy. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to affirm that. There's a good word. We have to wrap up, but but I want to affirm what you're saying. And my former husband did wear I came home one time and he was wearing a dress of mine. I kind of went, what the heck? I'm like, well, the kids were in school at that time, and I came home from work, and there he was. And but the reality is very interesting. We have similar paths as far as all that. I have become a clothes horse in my second marriage since my children moved out. But you know what? Before that, it was my ex was all about how he looked. And it's interesting when you talk about that in that whole community and the money. I think we need to come back and maybe the next show talk about money and the whole perhaps the whole big picture of who's funding all this stuff.
Oh, yes.
I think that would be a good place.
Well, there's that, and then just the money when you talk about it is really being utilized everywhere. So from people that are mental health professionals getting paid at $150 an hour to tell Ute to go home and be passive and do what he wants in the bedroom, to the individual selling that individual the clothes. The list just goes on and on and on. It's a money trail. And yeah, we can definitely take a look at that in our next episode for sure. John, any final comments today?
Just appreciative that Ute is willing to tell her story. Ute, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ann?
Yeah.
I think I've said enough for today. I've kind of gone on. Thank you, Ute.
It's a hard subject, so thank you. Ute, we're going to have you back. This will continue.
Thank you very much, Ute, for everything you've provided here today. You've opened up a lot of eyes for a lot of not only trans widows, but I guess just wives in general or women in general that are going through this and see some of this deviance happening within their own environments. There is a way to combat this. There is a way to get out. There is help. There is guidance. And if somebody's telling you the opposite, they're liars. And we, right here at Unmasking the Trans Movement, are all about helping you. So please make sure you share this with your friends, your family. We're here for the kids. We're here for the parents. We're here for just the women in general. I mean, women are taking a beating today. And for some of us men who are still alpha males, we're concerned and we know what's going on. I'm Brad Wilder. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. On behalf of all of our special guests today, John Euler, as well as Dr. Ann Gillies and Ute Heggen, thank you very much for being here. I'm Brad Wilder. We'll see you next time.